I don't have any evidence before me as we speak that it went beyond this incident. But I can't tell you that I know that for sure as to every aspect of everything, because now I have to be much more circumspect about that. Prior to yesterday, I believed that if I looked someone in the eye who I worked with and trusted and asked them, that I would get an honest answer. Maybe that was naive, but that's what I believed. So now I'm going and digging in and asking more questions, but I can't make a warranty on that. I won't, because when I did that 4 weeks ago, I wound up being wrong.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Where does this investigation, let alone scandal, go next? Now, it's continuing on a whole number of fronts. First, you got from a federal prosecutor, U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, which, oh, just by the way, used to be Christie's old job. That federal official says that he is officially reviewing the matter. The Inspector General for the Port Authority, they referred the matter to the U.S. Attorney Paul Fishman, and Fishman's office says that he is reviewing facts to determine, quote, whether a federal law was implicated. And could this investigation go even higher than that? State Senator Barbara Buono, who you saw referred to in the emails, Democratic nominee whose challenge to Christie led to the Bridge Lane showdown, well, she is asking the Justice Department here to investigate. And we're getting late word here tonight that FBI officials are hinting the Bureau may, in fact, get involved in the investigation as well. There's also the potential of new information coming from a possible civil suit against the state and the governor. This, as reports come out that the bridge delays may have compromised safety in Fort Lee, and get this, perhaps even worse. At least 4 emergency calls in the city were delayed, all because of the traffic that those lane closures generated. And one of those that needed assistance was a 91-year-old woman who later died. Though it's not clear if her death was caused or even influenced by the delays, but nonetheless, the question has been raised. And in other cases, response time doubled as ambulances tried to battle through the bridge traffic. And then, of course, there are the formal investigations by the state Senate and the state Assembly. Earlier this hour, we took you inside the hearing room in Trenton, where a former Christie aide to the Port Authority was cited for contempt. So the question is, what happens now? And to find out, we're going to bring in the man who is running this investigation in the legislature, Assemblyman John Wisniewski. And for more, we are joined by the chairman of that committee hearing, John Wisniewski. You know, Wildstein's attorney said that what your committee was after, it was all politically charged, and this was more about political theater than anything else. Since he never gave any of the answers, give the public at home the idea of what you wanted to get to the bottom to if he was more forthright.
Well, it's clearly not political. I mean, we see an abuse of power and a misuse of public resources that are very disturbing. But we see an email from Bridget Kelly on August 13th to David Wildstein saying it's time for traffic problems in Fort Lee. You'd have to have had a conversation before that email was sent and received to actually understand what that's about. We need to know who that conversation was with, who was in the meeting. Under what basis does Mr. Wildstein take orders from Bridget Kelly, a Deputy Chief of Staff in the Governor's office? I mean, the list goes on. And so while the emails are revealing and instructive, and we certainly now know that the order to close the lanes came from the Governor's office, it's by no means conclusive or answers all the questions we have. We need to know what the Governor knew and when he knew it. We need to know who else in the Governor's office was involved.
Here's the part, and you're much closer to this than I am, obviously, Assemblyman, but what I don't understand is how does it not strain credulity to think that Bridget Kelly could operate completely rogue with nobody knowing what she was doing and thinking she was within her purview, that she could do this and there'd be no recriminations?
It is inconceivable that a person like Bridget Kelly could hatch, think up, cook up an idea like this, call David Wildstein, and that he would unquestioningly execute these orders with a very terse statement that it's time for traffic in Fort Lee. I mean, any normal, rational person would have to ask why. Somebody would have to ask under what authority, who told you. None of that took place. So we have to understand and assume that there were those conversations beforehand, and that's what we weren't able to get to today. And by providing those documents, Mr. Wildstein waived any ability to object to being questioned under those documents. And the committee intends to continue to pursue those answers.
You know, I heard the mayor of Fort Lee last night. One of the things that struck me was he was worried, Assemblyman, about when the cameras were off this story and the focus went away, that he'd face recriminations and payback. Is this just a paranoid guy, or is this more SOP in Jersey that we in the public don't really know about for the past 4 years?
Look, the governor's tried to package himself as a no-nonsense, straight-talking, transparent person. What we've seen is a bully who is not above resorting to thuggish tactics, where people are literally afraid to do or say things for fear of retribution. We saw that with Bob Durando and Cedric Fulton, two career employees of the Port Authority, who knew the instructions they were given to close the lanes was wrong, but as one of them said, I didn't dare question it. I was afraid of Mr. Wildstein's reaction. And the other one said, I didn't want to tempt fate. It's wrong that anybody in public service should be under the fear of losing their job for doing the right thing.
I'm curious, what stuck out to you the most here that's made you most frustrated since this story's unraveled?
Government only works if our citizens have trust that government is working in their best interest and working for their benefit. And when we see people abuse their government authority, when we see them abuse the resources that are given to them to apparently execute a political agenda, to exact retribution on a mayor of a community, it causes people to lose trust in government. We have a lot of stories as to why people are cynical about government. We don't need to add fuel to the fire. And what the governor and his people have done is they've added fuel to the fire here. They have given people additional reason to feel cynical about government. And that's very hard to turn around. And so while the governor said today he's going to apologize to the residents of Fort Lee and to the mayor and to the people of the state of New Jersey, that apology can't undo the cynicism that he himself has created. And that is the most distressing.
Do you trust this governor?
I certainly have my reasons to question his veracity when it comes to some of the statements he's made about this event. You know, he started out by ridiculing the legislature and joking about it, by buying into the crazy story that Bill Baroni concocted about a traffic study. Matter of fact, today he was still clinging to it. I mean, if you look at the emails, and he said he has, it becomes very clear this is a political operation. This was no traffic study. It became very clear that the experts who were involved, that were advising Mr. Baroni and Wildstein, said this is going to be a disaster, and they didn't care. And when it became a disaster, they laughed about it. And so I think that it's very hard to believe the governor's statement when you look at the totality of the documents. And I think what needs to happen here, if the governor is true to his words and he really wants to put this behind him and he wants to get to the bottom of this, he ought to share all of the documents, all of the emails, personal and public, that people on his staff have from the middle of August or early August all the way through the current date, so that the committee can examine them, so the committee could understand what took place in the governor's office. And no matter where those emails land, we ought to know, because that ought to be fixed before we move forward.
Assemblyman, I wish you the best of luck with the investigation, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, of course, we'll follow the investigation, but this story has really raised another larger question as well. Even if the bridge shutdown wasn't ordered by the governor, even if he didn't know, imagine for a second, Governor Kane, Governor Whitman, could you imagine one of their staffers orchestrating this whole thing? Did this come out of thin air, or was a culture created that this is the environment, and this is the governor that many have labeled a bully, that fostered, let alone permitted, this kind of activity? We're going to get into that and about the culture that surrounds Chris Christie right after this.